Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
And a good afternoon to you all. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and wishing you a happy Thursday as we approach the end of this 2024 year in review here on Ave Maria in the Afternoon. Of course, this is Brian Shanley. I'm Marcus's producer. I was also Al's producer for many years, and I've always enjoyed taking this time at the end of the year to look back on everything that happened in the last several months. Of course, we are continuing to pray for the victims of the horrible attack that happened in New Orleans on New Year's Eve night, and we'll have more to say on that either tomorrow or next week. Today, we are going to discuss one of the ways that we can navigate the culture, and that is how the Eucharist can help us transform politics. In Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis says that politics is, quote, a lofty vocation and one of the highest forms of charity, inasmuch as it seeks the common good, end quote. Well, if you ask pretty much any American voter, myself included, they'll tell you, you know what, politics and charity couldn't be any further apart. And we'd say, most politicians really are not seeking the common good. So is there a way back? Well, Robert Dunn believes so. We're going to discuss how the Eucharist can help us to transform politics. Robert is the director of the Office of Public Policy for the Diocese of Manchester. He's also a McGrath Institute leader, and his Finding Communion column in the Diocese of Manchester magazine can be found online. We'll have that linked for you in the Ave Maria in the Afternoon guest archives. The Eucharist was obviously a huge focus for us this year with the National Eucharistic Congress, and we will discuss how transforming politics can help us to transform the culture. Also in this hour, in a similar note, we will say, can we return to Catholic sanity? It's become almost a cliche. Politics, craziness, division. The dust has settled a little bit. We're moving forward. There's going to be an inauguration in a few weeks. Is there a path back to Catholic sanity? Roger Nutt is our guest. He's the provost of Ave Maria University, where he also serves as a professor of theology. He's become a nice friend of the program and helping us to get lots of these great speakers who are on the staff at Ave Maria University, including Michael Dauphiné and others. And so he joins us again in this hour. Is there a step back to Catholic sanity? Can we transform the Eucharist in our politics? All of that coming up in this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon after this news break.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Thursday, January 2nd. It's the feast of St. Basil the Great. Today's news brought to you by Ave Maria University. Your location is at avemaria.edu. Bourbon Street is back open. The head of the New Orleans Police Department making the announcement, saying there will be a large police presence where just one day ago, 14 people were killed and dozens were injured in a terror attack.
What you see behind us is what we call hardening the target. So we have brought in heavy trucks.
Superintendent Ann Kilpatrick pushing back against claims that barriers which could have prevented the attack were not working or being replaced. If Bourbon Street were better blocked, she says he would have attacked elsewhere. Police are shooting down social media reports that say there is a link between the terror attack in New Orleans and the Tesla Cybertruck that exploded outside of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas.
We have no record that they served in the same unit or even at the same years at Fort Bragg.
Sheriff Kevin McHale with the Las Vegas Metro Police says that both men served in Afghanistan, but again, they never met. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force is looking into a motive for the explosion in Vegas. A spokesman says that both drivers worked alone. Pope Francis's prayer intention for the month of January is for the right to an education. In a video released today, the Holy Father said we are experiencing an educational catastrophe and said that due to wars, migration, and poverty, about 250 million children are unable to receive an education. The pontiff calling education, quote, a hope for everyone, because it opens the door to a better future. And the U.S. House is expected to vote for a new speaker tomorrow. It comes as some Republicans believe current Speaker Mike Johnson doesn't have the needed votes to remain in the role. Some Republicans growing frustrated with Johnson late last year as Congress worked to avoid a government shutdown. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
You're listening to the Ave Maria in the Afternoon 2024 Year in Review.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Joining me for this segment is Robert Dunn, Director of the Office of Public Policy for the Diocese of Manchester. In Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis calls politics a lofty vocation and one of the highest forms of charity, inasmuch as it seeks the common good. But if you ask most American voters, they'll tell you that politics and charity couldn't be further apart. So let's talk about how the Eucharist can transform our political vision. Bob, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thanks, Marcus. Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm very glad that you're here. So, when we think about politics in light of the church's, especially the church's social doctrine, you see this language that speaks about the common good, about charity that has to be the foundational law that guides all of our political discourse, our political policy making. But like you note, ask any American citizen, and that's probably the last thing they're going to think about in terms of politics. So where have we gone wrong here?
Well, that's a great question. If I knew the answer to that, I guess we would be able to solve the problems very quickly. But where we've gone wrong, I think, is in allowing politics and charity to be separated. Mm-hmm. That quote that you mentioned at the outset from Pope Francis, where he talks about politics as charity, that's something that's incredibly countercultural, right? We've come to see politics and charity as two diametrically opposed concepts, mm-hmm. and I think that our mission, the mission that is given to us by the Eucharist, by the sacrament of charity, is to bring those two things back together and to let people see that the Eucharistic mission is one in which we need to see politics as a part of the service of charity that the Eucharist bestows on us.
Right.
I really feel like we need to come to the conclusion that as Catholics, our work in the world of politics, far from being seen as an assertion of power, really needs to be seen as humble service. It needs to be seen as one essential way that we can wash the feet of our brothers and sisters.
Right. I mean, quoting Pope Pius XI, you see that politics is the field of charity at its most vast. And just what you described here, there's a very Eucharistic reality to how we ought to engage in politics, because it is about the preservation and administration of the common good and the propagation of it, the expansion of it. But all of these things I've just mentioned, that you've just mentioned, is devoid of how we think about public discourse in politics right now. It's become administrative and, as you rightly note, hyper-individualized.
That's so true. And I think, as I note in my essay, Ramona Guardini talked about the way that individualism settles into the liturgy, mm-hmm. that we tend to lose track of what's going on around us. The fact that we're participating in the liturgy as members of a corporate body of Christ,
right.
and that we need to be paying attention to what's going on in the lives of the people that are around us and the lives of the people that are in Catholic churches around the world, and indeed the lives of all human beings around the world. And that same type of individualistic approach that we've tended to devolve into liturgically is mirrored by what we do in the political world, because
right.
we have such an emphasis in modern political culture around radical individualism. The idea that politics is about advancing my own self-interest, mm-hmm. even if that is contrary to the common good. It's all about me. And if there's one thing that the Eucharist teaches us, it's that it is about us, not I.
Right.
And people that are standing before the presence of God in the Eucharist And that forms us, I think, into a group of people that should be good citizens that can see that our work in the public square is about advancing human dignity in the common good rather than simply continuing this approach to political culture. Highly individualistic.
That's right. And Bob, so you highlight some really key issues here, which in the interest of our listeners, we really ought to point out. Number one, we make the mistake of thinking that man is a purely political being. He is to be sure, but even greater than that, he's a liturgical being. Man is made for worship. Well, it's not so much that we worship our politics, as so many commentators seem to think. Really, we as you mentioned, have been worshiping ourselves, and that has transcended into the way we engage in liturgy, and therefore into the way we engage in our political sphere. It's all about advancing self-interest, what I like, what I feel like, which candidate appeals to me emotionally, which ones I don't like because I can't stand the person. It's not about truth, it's not about common good, and it certainly isn't about the welfare of my fellow man in society.
That's true. You just stated it perfectly, Marcus. And one thing that occurs to me as you're saying all that is that we often think about the common good as a religious principle. And it obviously is, because it's one of the four fundamental pillars of Catholic social teaching. But it's also something that is baked into the American political experience as well. We have to remember that the preamble to the U.S. Constitution says that one of the reasons the government is being founded is to promote the general welfare. And in many state constitutions, and this is certainly here in the state of New Hampshire, Part 1, Article 1 of our state constitution says that government is instituted for the general good. So that by advancing this notion that our work in the world of politics should be done in service of the common good, we're not only advancing one pillar of Catholic social teaching, but we're really calling the body politic back to the better angels of its nature.
Right.
Because it is something that the country was founded on. Now, granted, that was the aspiration, and it has certainly not been put into effect in any sort of a consistent way over the course of the last 200 somewhat years. But that is the reason that our body politic was founded. And so I hope that by the work that we do in the public square, we can be attractive to members of the body politic and to call them back to say, wait a minute, here's what our country was founded to be. We need to get back to that aspiration.
And so, Bob, here's the issue, right? That aspiration, as you rightly point out, has a divine telos. There's a finality that culminates in accountability toward, in the concept of our founding fathers, right? The God of nature, or nature's God, the Judeo-Christian framework. Ultimately, what we're looking at is our engagement in the work of politics is meant to sanctify our society, but it can only happen if our worship is rightly ordered. And because everything has been completely reversed to focus on the self, far from sanctifying now, we are individualizing even our work in politics, and we wonder why society is fragmenting from the inside out.
Yes, the whole purpose of what it is that we do liturgically, though, what we do as citizens is in order to participate as members of a body, whether it's the body politic or the body mystical.
Right.
And the skills that we learn in both of those places are things that are going to help us to advance those skills in the other spot. I think that it is, you mentioned the word telos, and I think that is really one of the key words. It doesn't appear directly in my essay, but it is what the essay is all about.
Right.
It is the Eucharist as the telos.
So we're going to pause there. My guest, Bob Dunn, Director of the Office of Public Policy for the Diocese of Manchester. And we are talking about how the Eucharist can transform our vision of politics. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Support for this Ave Maria radio program comes in part by the non-for-profit St. Anthony Services. Are you shopping for mortgage products, Catholic investing, Catholic health, real estate, or estate planning? StAnthonyServices.org can help you find a Catholic professional for these needs. They regularly connect faithful citizens with faith-based professionals that share our Christian values. More information at StAnthonyServices.org or 877-LIFE-US1.
Maybe you've been hearing a lot about the need to make a spiritual communion while participating from home in a live-streamed or broadcast Mass. Maybe you've even prayed the prayer of spiritual communion. Spiritual communion is a concept that goes all the way back to the 4th century. It flourished in the Eastern Church and gradually moved west. Spiritual communion stresses the transcendence of God, where we unite our desires, intentions, and loves with the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the consecration of the Eucharist at the altar. Jesus, I embrace you and unite myself wholly to you.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title of the Angelic Doctor.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Thomas Aquinas wrote a basic textbook for young theology students that became the Church's most famous guide to the faith, the Summa Theologica. It helped him earn the title Doctor of the Church. He died in 1274.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
My daughter told me she was published in a scientific journal as an undergrad. I'm so proud of her. The world needs Catholic physicists, and my daughter's going to be one of them.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
Listening to the Ave Maria in the Afternoon 2024 Year in Review.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. My guest is Bob Dunn, Director of the Office of Public Policy for the Diocese of Manchester. We're talking about how the Eucharist can transform our political thinking. So, Bob, we were talking earlier about developing a more selfless vision of how we engage in politics, because that's fundamentally what the Eucharist is about. It's about the complete giving of self, of the Son of God, for our sake. And if we capture that essence in Eucharistic worship, that should overflow into how we engage in our political work.
Perfectly stated, Marcus. The liturgy forms us away from a temptation to self-interest. It is, as Pope Benedict says in Deus Caritas Est, it draws us into Jesus' act of self-offering, and it causes us to enter into the very dynamic of his self-giving. We tend not to think about the Eucharist in those terms. I think that, I was at Notre Dame a couple of years ago when I was walking around the campus with one of the theology professors out there, and I noted how dramatic the Golden Dome is there. It draws your eye wherever you are on the campus. And he mentioned to me that if you work there, the dome is really just part of the wallpaper, and you don't notice it that much. And I think that in many ways that's a great analogy for how we look at the Eucharist. It's the most momentous thing possible, but it's there in front of us every single Sunday or even every single day. And so I think that it's important for us to return to the momentousness of the Eucharist. And Pope Benedict, in his apostolic exhortation, the Sacrament of Charity, really captured this, because he mentions, as you may recall there, that the Eucharist is like nuclear fission. And it speaks in the most profound and far-reaching terms. And in fact, it is one of the provisions in the Sacrament of Charity that I found the origin of this essay. And the Pope Benedict said in the Sacrament of Charity that the Eucharist calls us to nothing less than the transformation of every aspect of our human existence to the glory of God. And that clearly includes the world of politics as well. We don't tend to think in those terms, right? I know I didn't wake up this morning with transformation of every aspect of human existence at the top of my to-do list. But that's what the Eucharist indeed calls us to do.
Right.
And I can't think of many aspects of our human existence that are more sorely in need of transformation than the political world is.
And that's the problem, right? It's so hard to see the mystical in the mundane. It's so hard to see the profound in the ordinary. It's so hard to see the supernatural in our natural functions, especially in terms of my work in the voting booth. And yet, even that is a participation in God's intended order and hierarchy of my stewarding the created order.
Exactly. We in the same way that the liturgy teaches us that ordinary matter can be consecrated to God and can lead us to God, so can our work in the public square be consecrated to God and lead us to God. That the political is one aspect of human existence which can be lifted up to God. If we can interject charity into the world of politics, then caritas et amor, Deus EBS.
And okay, so you bring up that proposition, and herein lies the problem. If we don't see caritas et amor, then really it suffices to say we're not putting God into that situation.
Exactly. That's the reason that we need to be active in the public square, because to carry out that Eucharistic mission is going to require us to be the ones that bring love and charity into the public square and hopefully serve as a model to the body politic of a different way of engaging politically that I think is something that would be attractive to people, because there's a great sense of despair and hopelessness around the political world.
Yep.
And if there's one thing that we bring as Christians, it is hope. And that's why I think it's important for us to be thinking about how we can reinterject hope into the world of politics by our Eucharistic mission.
Right, and that's precisely why hyper-partisanship flies in the face of the Catholic law of charity, because if we're treating our political work as nothing more than a self-serving avenue, then yes, we're going to gravitate towards those people who scratch our interior itches. But if we're really seeking the betterment of the other, then we're going to look for those candidates who are themselves selfless, because we want selflessness and therefore caritas to be the law of the land, and because we know that's going to bring about true national flourishing.
Precisely. It is. What you've just said highlights why it's so essential that we are out there doing this work.
Yes.
Because if we don't do it, who else will? Mm-hmm. We tend to try to shy away from politics because we find it distasteful. But we need to return to this idea that we can change the culture. We don't have to accept modern political culture as a given, because the Eucharist and Catholic social teaching give us the freedom to go out there and to try to bring love and charity, mercy, reconciliation, all the fruits of the Eucharist into the public square.
Yep. And that's precisely why when we talk about the Eucharist as the sacrament of communion, we're not talking about this hold hands and sing Kumbaya akin to John Lennon's Imagine. We're actually talking about the reestablishment of the objective order and that comes from the divine mind, which is the only pathway to true human justice, true human flourishing, and ultimately heavenly beatitude.
Right. We need to through the Eucharist, we lose the ability to look at other people through our own eyes, and we now must see them only through the eyes of the crucified Jesus. And as Pope Benedict said in the Sacrament of Charity, we need to look at other people as brothers and sisters whom Jesus loved to the end. And if we do that, it certainly is going to shape how we look at other people in the public square. We're not going to be able to imitate all of the worst aspects of modern political culture, because as people of the Eucharist, we need to be viewing other people in an entirely different way.
Yep. Well, Bob, I want to say thank you for making the time to speak with us. This was a truly enlightening conversation.
Thanks for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
My guest has been Bob Dunn, Director of the Office of Public Policy for the Diocese of Manchester. If we reclaim a truly Eucharistic liturgical worldview for ourselves individually, if we stop being self-centered, if we order our lives towards being selfless, which means turning to look at the God of the universe who calls us to a life that's greater than the temporal order, then we start realizing that our lives are not for this world. This is but a place of sojourn. And if that is the case, then I have to steward this world well, because I will have to make an account to God for it. And that includes how I engage in politics. I once heard someone say that, well, I don't agree with a lot of my fellow Catholics, and so I feel like a political orphan. Well, good. Catholics are meant to be quote-unquote political orphans. Neither party is meant to be the salvific image of the Catholic gospel. Our job is to model that, is to inculcate this theological Eucharistic worldview in our own life, in the lives of our family members, and engage in politics so that we can transform the world and hopefully reclaim this land and the world for the glorious name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I'm Marcus Peter.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866 Ave Maria or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Do you have a teenager at home who's full of potential? Too often the world is telling you to be content with mediocrity instead of raising respectful and responsible young adults with strong character. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Ray. If you need some help, not only to navigate those teen years, but to really enjoy them, check out my book, Standing Strong, Good Discipline Makes Great Teens, as well as my other books on the store page at AveMariaRadio.net.
The most amazing saints from modern times, John Paul II, Maximilian Kolbe, and Maria Faustina with the Divine Mercy. This is Steve Ray. We invite you to join us on a pilgrimage to Poland and experience this incredible Catholic country, the land of saints, Catholic culture, gorgeous churches and shrines, and delicious food. Join us next April as we again visit Poland, one of our favorite pilgrimage destinations.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net.
How is the priestly prayer of Jesus unique in the economy of salvation? According to the Catholic Catechism, it is unique because it reveals the ever-present prayer of Jesus and at the same time contains what Jesus teaches us about our prayer to our Father. As Jesus fulfills his Father's plan of love, he gives us a glimpse of the depth of his filial prayer when he agonizes in the garden, Abba, not my will, but thine. His last words on the cross exhibit prayer and gift of self as one when he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Later, with a loud cry, he surrenders his spirit. All the troubles for all times, states the Catechism, of humanity enslaved by sin and death, all the petitions and intercessions of salvation history are summed up in this cry of the incarnate Word. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Dr. Ray Guarendi. When I've had enough. I ask parents, when do you decide to discipline? One of the most common answers is, when I've had enough. If discipline is designed to teach, then we need to discipline before we've had enough. We need to discipline because the behavior's wrong, not because emotionally it's pushed us to our edge. Besides, when you get to when you've had enough, you're much more likely to yell and scream and say things that you have to go to confession for. So, the suggestion is discipline out of principle, not emotion. Principle means because it needs discipline, and I'm going to do it when I'm calm. Emotion means I'm going to be moved to do it just because I'm mad.
The Ave Maria in the afternoon, 2024 Year in Review.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. We've been continuing the conversation of regaining Catholic sanity in especially the United States, but honestly, the world as well, in light of recent elections and political upheavals of sorts. Having this conversation with me in terms of building the Catholic culture is a friend, a teacher, a mentor, Dr. Roger Nutt, who is the provost of Ave Maria University. He's also professor of systematic theology, particularly the sacraments. That's his true strong suit. And he leads a lot of the theological charge at Ave Maria University, which my alma mater, and I'm extremely proud of it. So, Roger, I want to first of all say thank you. You're visiting our studios today. It's a real joy to have you here.
It is an honor to be here, and it's so great to be able to converse with you face to face.
I appreciate that as well. All too often, I'm always talking to you on the other side of the phone. Now, the other thing I'd like to express gratitude for is when I was at Ave Maria University, it was probably the first time for me outside of a secular narrative and secular institutions. And I saw how political movements, upheavals, issues did not impact campus life and culture the same way the secular world does feel that impact. In fact, I dare say right now, given the results of the recent election, the campus of Ave Maria University is not parading the win of a party or the loss of the other. Instead, as it's always been, it's praying for, fasting, and doing penance for the sanctification of the country and the world. So I really want to start there, building and reclaiming that ethos of a natural and Catholic culture.
You're exactly right. In the lead up to the election, we prayed and offered masses that God's will would be done and that America would be a place where God is glorified. And since the elections, we have continued to pray for the very same thing.
And I think that's so beautiful because while on the other side, when you take God out of the public sphere and God out of the conversation in general, all we can do is get overtly invested in the ebbs and flows of our political candidates. It becomes a kind of cult worship of personality, and I've seen this become nothing short of destructive.
Spending time with our alumni, like you and I are doing now, reminds me of our great common mentor at Ave Maria University, Father Matthew Lamb. Mm-hmm. And he was such a theological giant. And I remember him saying many times that if you want to understand all of Western intellectual history in one sentence, and that is very difficult to do, how do you deal with Kant and Hume and Descartes and Nietzsche and Aristotle and Plato and Aquinas and Augustine? He would say it's this. It's very simple. From the Greeks through about the time of the Reformation, the pursuit was wisdom. Mm-hmm. And after the Reformation, through the Enlightenment, the pursuit is power. Mm. And I think that goes directly to the point that you're raising now and how we think about politics, perhaps in a way that we're not even aware, right, is that politics has become a partisan battle for power and not a pursuit of how to live a wise and well-ordered life.
Right. Gosh, so we've spoken about, you can go about as far back as the Regensburg Address and how Ratzinger charts out that course for us, the stages of de-Hellenization in Western civilization that the world suffered from as a result. There was a point where human flourishing, human culture, was ordered towards the pursuit of wisdom for the sake of living what is ostensibly the good life by proper definition. But when that was taken out of the conversation, the self took over, and the self craves that power in the societal sphere more than anything. And like you said, that's become common parlance in our political discourse today.
Right, right. This will sound strange, I think, to your listeners, and we will want to tease it out, but one of the really great gifts of a Catholic university, a faithful Catholic university, because of the harmony between faith and reason, is that it actually illumines and sheds light on the proper harmony of the natural order. Mm-hmm. So part of the chaos, I think, that we're seeing outside of a proper Christian culture is that they don't understand that faith actually strengthens, perfects, and even intensifies our understanding and interaction with the natural order. So at Ave Maria University, we actually teach our students how, as political creatures, we even had a colleague, he's now at Assumption University, Dr. Mark Guerra wrote a book called Christians as Political Animals. Mm-hmm. Well-formed Catholic and Christian students understand what their roles are proximate to the natural order as well, because they understand themselves within the providential order. Right. And that's super important for making decisions about politics and what constitutes a just regime.
You know, Roger, coming from my anti-Catholic Pentecostal background before I became Catholic, there was a real sense of a complete repudiation of the natural order, even the material order for that matter. We got to break out of this body. We got to liberate the spirit man. And because of that, the notion of a civic responsibility that every Christian who professes faith in Jesus Christ owes to the state, to the common good, simply doesn't exist. But the Catholic narrative says, no, Christ's lordship is over every facet of human existence, including natural, governmental, administrative policies that either order towards or deviate from the common good.
That's right. I think the best word is flourishing. What is essential for human flourishing? It's not simply the ability to go to church for 1 hour on Sunday, although that is essential. But there are many, many ingredients, starting with knowledge, stable family life, a just civil order, that are constitutive of human flourishing. So the political order is subordinate to the order of faith, but it's also elevated and directed to human flourishing when it's linked with faith in a harmonious way.
Right. And you're sharing this. I'm remembering some things I learned from Dr. Long in my moral theology class. The proportionate hierarchy of moral goods, right? That used to be part of the conversation. This was how we understood and viewed the natural order and by virtue of divine revelation. That concept has been thrown out the window, so much so that we think that all political issues, all societal issues, are one amongst many issues. And unfortunately, that's how we view the work we do in electing our government officials as well. And that can cause detrimental effects, if not destructive and frankly, murderous effects.
Yeah, you're reminding me of a Vatican document issued by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith maybe 20 years ago, with sometimes the titles of Vatican documents are not super creative, but it was like something like on some aspects of Christians in public life. Right. And this magisterial document does teach that there is not a moral commensurability between issues, say, around life and issues around the environment. It would be ideal if we had candidates and parties and regimes that hit all the right notes, but it's not justifiable to vote for a candidate because we prefer them on one issue if they are off on issues that are defined as intrinsic evils. So that understanding of a proportionate hierarchy of goods is really essential for all of us in the way that we participate in political life, to make sure that our human agency, when it's exercised through voting, corresponds to the order of flourishing that the church sets forth for us.
Right, and that's so crucial to think about, that when I'm sitting in that booth, I owe moral accountability to God for every box I'm coloring in.
Yeah.
That, in some sense, Roger, that should make us shake a little. That should make us quake in our boots as we're filling in those ballots.
Yeah, I actually think that this basic point, that voting is a moral action for which we are culpable, has been completely forgotten, and we treat it almost as something passive or something that has no moral culpability.
My guest, Dr. Roger Nutt, Provost of Ave Maria University. We're talking about how Catholic institutions and universities are at the forefront. They are the hubs of the rebuilding of, first, a Catholic culture, but most of all, a sane culture in the United States and in the world. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
The Heart of the Interior Life with Elizabeth Jangle.
What does the term discernment of spirits mean? Father Timothy Gallagher writes, discern comes from the Latin discernere, which means to separate things according to their qualities, to distinguish between one thing and another. In this case, to identify one spiritual reality as different from another. Discernment is the process of separating spiritual movements and looking at the origin of each and the thoughts connected to it. Father Gallagher continues, the phrase of spirits describes what is to be discerned, that is, which spiritual realities are to be distinguished, one from the other. The word spirits, as Ignatius uses it in this context, indicates those affective stirrings of the heart: joy, sadness, hope, fear, peace, anxiety, and similar feelings, with their related thoughts that influence our life of faith and progress toward God.
For more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. When your children consider going to college, where are you going to find a place that will prepare them for the future and build on the foundation that you've laid? The answer? Ave Maria University. With an authentically Catholic curriculum, including 35 majors, AMU prepares students to take on the world.
I've seen the difference in my son since he's been at Ave Maria. He's happy, he's excited about what he's going to do with his degree, and he's living his faith.
Learn more at avemaria.edu. That's avemaria.edu.
And now, the EWTN Family Prayer with Father Joseph.
Family, a prayer that we pray together is a powerful prayer. So please pray together with me our EWTN Family Prayer. Today we pray for the caregivers of the sick. O most Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we adore you. You have first loved us, and through your Son you have taught us the excellence of self-giving love. Give to those who are caregivers of a sick parent or child, brother or sister, the assistance of your holy angels. Lessen their burdens and give them great joy in practicing a work of mercy. And since charity is never forgotten by you, reveal to them their heavenly reward. Amen.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popcak.
How do we raise faithful kids? Well, the answer is surprising. Make the faith the source of the warmth in your home. 50 years of research involving thousands of families has shown that the single most important way to increase the likelihood that children will own their faith as adults is to let them experience the practical difference their faith makes in their daily family lives. Kids who grow up in homes where the practice of their faith makes their households more peaceful, more loving, more joyful, are much more likely to practice their faith as adults. Why? Because for kids especially, faith is only real if they can see it being lived out at home and producing good fruit in their relationships at home. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Ave Maria in the afternoon, 2024 Year in Review.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. My guest is Dr. Roger Nutt, Provost of Ave Maria University, and he was my professor of sacramental theology. He also was my advisor. He helped me select the courses that I chose in my lineup of my master's degree, and it proved to be tremendously beneficial. Now, Roger, you mentioned earlier that, and honestly, I think it's something that we've taken for granted, that there's a moral act involved in our act of voting. This is not a passive secular work that we're doing. This is still subsumed in the order of divine revelation that we owe accountability to Christ for.
That's right. And the important thing to consider with politics is there's a magnifying of effect to these moral choices. Many of our human actions impact us or maybe just the people around us in a limited way. But if we give a politician, in a sense, our power to act on our behalf, and they use that power at the federal level to do immoral things, the simple decision to vote for a certain candidate could have ramifications for thousands or even millions of people. You can think about Roe v. Wade as a prime example. So these are not simply isolated decisions that we do every 4 years or every 2 years and then you walk away and forget about. Those decisions reverberate during the course of the political careers of the people who we vote for. And they're actually using our power on our behalf. That's part of the American political system. So we have a kind of shared culpability for the elected officials that we vote for.
At the risk of quoting Monty Python, supreme executive power is derived from a mandate of the masses. It was the intent of the founding fathers. And so we have this democratic process, but the principle here is that we ought to be able to expect some level of virtue in our conduct, in our civic duty, and therefore in the candidates that we elect into executive office. The problem is, even now, natural virtue is not part of the conversation anymore. This entire political race was about mudslinging. It was about, well, what are your policies? It was, well, what about his policies? It was a throw mud here, throw mud there. And in the process, it's really the growth in virtue and therefore the flourishing of every individual in the nation and in the world that's been thrown out as babies with the bathwater.
That's right. There's a famous quote from an author who liberal ideologues like to point out when they point the quote against conservative politicians. It's something like, when I show you who I am, believe me. But when you think about this point that you're making on virtue and even natural virtue, if someone has lived for 10 or 20 or 30 years in a very immoral way, and we are essentially electing them to exercise prudential decision-making power on our behalf, their measure of virtue is going to determine to a large part the quality of the decisions that they make. And that is just so important. So we sometimes get hung up on success that they've had or polish or savvy, and we don't realize that they're going to make major decisions about war and peace and education and healthcare. We saw it during COVID. Think about all the second and third and fourth graders whose ability to read and write was compromised by a lack of courage by decision makers.
That's right. And decisions on marriage and the family, the redefining of marriage, redefining of the meaning of the human person. We are culpable. We have given that mandate, that capacity to these people to make moral, prudential judgment decisions for us on our behalf. And so in that sense, there's a kind of covenantal reality here at play. They're swearing themselves into office by virtue of the authority that we have conferred upon them. And so whenever these moral quote-unquote curses are unleashed upon the nation, we are truly morally culpable. There's a price to be paid, a debt owed to the common good for the result of our decision making.
That's right, which you cannot outrun.
Yes.
You know, we never think that we deserve, you know, the things that happen to us or the political chaos that we live through. But very early in one of the Federalist Papers, Madison makes the comment along the lines that the essence of America is that you get to choose what kind of community you live in by participating in political life. And I think that's a basic point that we forget, too. If everyone just stepped back and said, what do I want my neighborhood, my town, my state, my country to be like, and voted that way, I think the country would look very different. But we get so hung up in the partisan power wars that we forget about these higher goods that you've been alluding to.
And just to quote from the Federalist Papers a little more, in 1969, they talk about how it's easy for a candidate to appeal to the sentiments of anywhere up till a state. But it's crucial for a candidate to be able to appeal to the diverse masses. And that's how we get kind of our justification for the Electoral College. But the point we want to make here is that this candidate that's running is now being given the moral impetus of speaking on behalf of and making prudential judgment decisions on behalf of every person in the nation. Because whether or not you voted for him, now he is in charge of the entire nation.
That's right. That's right. The Catholic Church does a very good job of pointing out the difference between common goods and private goods. A private good is like a piece of cake. I eat it, it's gone, it's mine. But common goods, if you think of something as simple as 2 + 2 is 4, billions of people can know it, and they're perfected by knowing it, and that truth itself is not in any way diminished by its shareability. And politicians actually have an obligation to serve the common good, that is to create conditions in which flourishing is possible, not by diminishing private goods, but by accentuating the higher goods that are infinitely shareable.
And that distinction is what marks Catholic institutions from a lot of secular institutions. You go to we're down the road from University of Michigan. You go to anywhere on that campus and have a conversation about politics. It completely steers down the path of the notion of private goods.
That's right.
Catholic universities, Catholic institutions, and the Catholic Church have always put forth, if you are elected into any kind of service, because that's how the Church thinks about hierarchy in the Church. If you're elected into any form of service, any form of leadership, you are at the service of the common good of the individuals in your care, period. You are not your own. You have a responsibility that's greater than yourself. So help you God.
That's right. And if you think in the church of something like martyrdom, or if you think from a civil standpoint of the nobility of military service, there are times in which my private good is not the same as the common good, and we're required to make personal sacrifice to serve the common good. And that seems to me to be largely lost.
Yeah. Gosh, can you imagine entering into something like armed forces and saying, well, no, the preservation of my life takes precedence over all else.
Right.
You've relegated the mission, the common mission of the order to be subservient to your own private intentions, and the nation suffers at large. So let's talk about how places like Catholic universities are now the new hubs of building culture from the ground up. It used to be the monasteries, villages, institutions, economic structures were built around monasteries in early Europe. We don't have those structures anymore the same way. But Catholic universities are leading the charge there.
Yeah. So a couple of things that come to mind when I have to explain the essence of Ave Maria to people, or even how to think about Catholic higher ed in general. I often say there are 3 things people should really look at: the faculty, the curriculum, and the non-curricular life on the campus, the dorm culture, the campus ministry. But to think about the curriculum for a moment, at Ave Maria University, and I'm very proud of this, our students have to take 3 theology classes, 3 philosophy classes, no matter what their major is, and This is interesting. The point about faith perfecting the natural order, we require all of our students to take a class in American Civ because we want our students to be formed in the rich tradition of American political culture. Yeah. They read the Federalist Papers, they read the Constitution, they read the Declaration, the debates that happened around those things. So think about it. How many universities in America require a class in American Civ? Not very many, but we have a Catholic university precisely for the reasons that you and I have been discussing that want to form our students in the best of the American political tradition so that they can be a leaven in the culture.
Right.
And that, to the point about the monasteries, there is a way in which graduates of faithful Catholic universities who are formed in these principles will start to be a leaven in society, and like the monasteries that kept the light of truth alive, we will see that reverberate out.
Yep, amen. And that's the hope. It's so easy to think that everything is dark, everything is bleak, and that culture is not savable. That's completely not true. And given the notion of our religious liberty that we have in this nation, we have so much to be thankful for in our Judeo-Christian heritage. And Catholic institutions and universities lead that charge in forming that conversation, including not just theology and philosophy, but law, engineering, politics, history. You're forming individuals who are going to be holistically servants of the common good.
Yeah, let me give you one concrete example. When I came to Ave Maria University, there was an undergraduate student named Joe Tompkins. He's now Judge Joe Tompkins. He graduated from Ave Maria University, Ave Maria School of Law. He was practicing law, and about 2.5 years ago, he was appointed by Governor DeSantis to a state judiciary position in Florida. So these alumni of good, faithful Catholic universities are not just good moms and dads. They are that, and that's essential. But they are bringing the light of the gospel to all of the key areas of society, just like you're doing in media.
Thank you, Roger. And honestly, that's because Christ is Lord over everything. That's one of the things that is so implicit in the education I received in Ave that is taken for granted. Thank you so much for making the time, Roger.
Thanks for having me.
My guest, Dr. Roger Nutt, Provost of Ave Maria University, and we've been talking about how Catholic universities and institutions are leading the charge for the reclamation of sanity and virtue, and most of all, the reclamation of a Catholic ethos in the public sphere and in the world. Stay tuned, and thank you for joining us in this hour. I'm Marcus Peter.